is I want you to get up and I want you to look and find somebody you do not know. Go up to them and give them a really tight hug. Okay? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow, some people are still hugging. Excuse me, sir, in the corner. The hands a little higher. Okay, it's not this type of event. It's a PG crowd. Thank you so much for doing that. So believe it or not, you've just seen your intuition in action. And what you just felt is something called an intuitive signal. Okay, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. Now this whole concept of intuition, sometimes it's really kind of fuzzy, right? It's not as if you can touch it and you can bring it up and smell it. You can't attach a bar to it and rub your back and go, oh my God, I trust my intuition. Like, oh. You can't do that. I mean, it's like you're going onto your Facebook page and you know, talking about your relationship with intuition and saying, it's kind of complicated, right? Now, there are some people that just get it. You know, intuition just simply exists for them. And then there's others that need to see proof. You know, they need to see, you know, brain scans and research studies, and certainly I've got that in my book, God. And then there are people that don't believe that it exists, just like it does for my friend John Rothschild. Now, you have to understand now, John comes from a background in investment banking. So this is where data and Excel spreadsheets and past experience and learning really drives his business decisions and what he does in life. So he doesn't get these voices and these omens, and he just doesn't understand it, right? So, but I did tell him that I said, look, John, your intuition actually does come from past experience and past learning. And it helps you make successful decisions. And sometimes these decisions are ones that people just cannot understand. And so he got really excited and he said, well, he's going to tell me a story about one. And so this is a time that you can understand, this guy was probably making a couple $1 million a year, eating in private restaurants and you know, on private planes and you know, in limousines. And his intuition compelled him to leave all of that behind to run a dinky, bankrupt restaurant. Now, everybody and his wife was thinking, you are crazy. But he listened to his intuition, and he rolled up his sleeves, and he walked into that bankrupt restaurant. That restaurant was Eastside Mario's location number 1. And his intuition took that one location to over 1,000, over a number of brand names, going from 0 to over $2 billion in 20 years. Now, I talk about intuition at home all the time. I mean, it's for obvious reasons. So I kind of wondered what my daughters thought about intuition. I've got 2 daughters. And so my youngest one puts up her hand and she says, yeah, Dad, you know what? I was in line to see Santa Claus, and I got on on his lap, and he started to ask me, you know, what my name was and what I wanted for Christmas. And I'm telling you, Dad, when he started talking, his breath was stinking. So my intuition was telling me that I'm going to ask him to eat a candy cane. And that's exactly what he did. And he ate a candy cane, and then he asked me again what I wanted for Christmas and what my name was. And his breath smelled really good. And so she looks at me and says, Daddy, always trust your intuition. So the earliest that intuition had hit me was when I was 5 years old. And when I was 5, there was these video games that I wanted to buy. And my father was saying, they're too expensive. And so that's not what my intuition wanted to hear. And so I had this voice kind of tell me to go door to door to raise some money, and that's exactly what I did. So I raised $200, $100 went to charity, and the other $100 went to my father to pay for the video games. And that was the moment that my intuition knew. It was telling me that I was destined to be an entrepreneur. But something strange happens when we start to age, and we start listening to societal rules, and we start to listening to other people who, with their opinions, and they don't really care about what we want. And so there I was discussing career options with my father, and remember, I was destined to be an entrepreneur. And my father was very, very open. He's a very open guy. He says, son, you can do anything you want in this world. Absolutely anything. As long as it is doctor, lawyer, or engineer. And so I said, okay. So I ignored my intuition, and I listened to him. I didn't listen to myself, and I became that civil engineer. And the other thing that happens when you start to ignore your intuition is you start making some really emotional decisions. And there I was with a contract in hand to consult for a firm down in Silicon Valley. Very lucrative. Yet the contract terms kept changing, and my intuition was telling me, you better back off. But I was so emotionally tied to that contract that I spent every single penny moving down to Silicon Valley, only to find out that the company didn't pay me. I came back to Canada with 25 cents in my bank account. And the other thing that happens when you start to ignore your intuition is you stop being there for those who really are there to listen to your advice. And they trust you for what your experience is. And there was a situation happened to me when a really good friend reached out to me to get some advice on how to get rid of this guy that was bugging her. Now, my intuition was telling me that I should reach out to her that afternoon. I didn't have anything pressing at the time. Yet, for some reason, I ignored my intuition and I said, let's meet a couple of days later. Well, she did show up a couple of days later, but it wasn't to meet me. She showed up a couple of days later in the newspapers, because the very next day, that guy who she came to me for advice for, shot her in the head and killed her. So when I look back at all those devastating situations when I ignored my intuition, I started to ask myself, why? Why did I ignore my intuition when I absolutely knew what the right decision was? And to answer that very question, I spent tens of thousands of hours on research and interviewed over 1,000 people to find out why they ignored their intuition. And what I found out was truly shocking. Your intuition is actually incredibly complex, made up of 4 different types. And like a bolt of lightning, these 4 types of intuition come together to help you make the right decision at the right time in any situation that you find yourself in. And the other thing I discovered is that your intuition actually speaks to you through things called intuitive signals. And these signals are unique to each one of us. And the other thing that happens with these signals is they actually start very subtle in nature. And as you ignore your intuition and you start to get into uncomfortable situations, those signals change and they get louder. So if you think back to the exercise we had earlier on, one of the reasons why I asked you to hug somebody you didn't know is for many of you here, that's a very uncomfortable situation. And what you experience is an intuitive signal of your own. But the encouraging thing is, as I started to learn about my 4 types of intuition, that's when I started to trust my intuition a little bit more. And then I stopped listening to the advice of others. And I started listening to my own advice. And that's when I quit my civil engineering job, making $32,000 a year full-time, to run a Mexican restaurant where I was making over $150,000 part-time. And when I started to learn more about these intuitive signals that were unique to me, that's when I stopped making emotional decisions. And I started making the decisions that really opened up the doors of opportunity for me. And that got me to write a couple of books and tour around the world on stages just like this, talking to tens of thousands of people, just sending a simple message to trust their intuition. And as I was able to trust my intuition even more by becoming an expert in my intuitive capabilities, that's when I was there for those very people that needed my advice and my experience. And I helped many people out of the dark places of their lives, breaking things like their cycle of addiction, abuse, and suicidal ideation. And one of the things that I learned, which was one of the biggest lessons, is that when I took the time to really understand how complex my intuition really was, that's when I was able to overcome whatever barriers or hurdles I had that was preventing me from tapping into my intuition. And once I was able to do that, that's when life was really great, with true meaning and purpose. And we all try and make it so very complicated, but it's actually really simple. And I can't get any simpler than the 4 words that my daughter told me, and that simply is, Daddy, always trust your intuition. Thank you.